Hi, guys. The last time that we read, Molly and Kip were in the village and they were talking to Hester, and she said that she would tell them a story about the night gardener, but she wanted whatever was in Kip's pocket. Molly looked down at Kip and saw that he did indeed have one hand in the pocket of his coat. He was It was balled up in a little fist, as though he were holding something. He shifted, uncomfortable. "My hand's cold," he said. The woman smiled. "Cold or not, you give me whatever's in there, and we'll call it even." It was obvious that Kip did not want to do this. Molly leaned toward him. "We got no choice," she whispered. The truth was, Molly was grateful that the woman had asked for the contents of Kip's pocket and not her own. In her pocket were the letters from Ma and Dad, and she would never be able to give those up. Kip bit his lip. "All right." He pulled his fist from his pocket and placed something small on the table. "It's a wishing button. Molly gave it to me." "You don't say," the woman whistled. "Two pups come to me wanting to know about a man in a tree, and of all the things they could pay, they give me a button to wish on." She picked it up, holding it between her fingers like a jewel. "I'll take good care of it." She reached over to her pack and removed a short length of string that seemed to have been put there just for this occasion. She carefully laced the string through the buttonhole and then tied it around her neck. Molly squeezed her brother's hand. She knew it meant something to give up that button, even if it was just make-believe. "We paid your price," she said. "Now let's hear the tale." "Legend," Kip corrected. "Indeed," Hester said, leaning close. "We'll call it the legend of the night gardener." Night gardener? Just hearing those words sent bumps along Molly's arm. It was as if the woman had given a name to the man in the fog. Molly looked at her brother, who was staring at the woman, eyes wide. Hester Kettle produced a pipe from her stash and stuffed it with tobacco. She lit the bowl and puffed slowly. Smoke curled up from the end, dissolving into the cloud above them. Like all legends, it's very old. Goes back farther than anyone can tell. Before saints and scrolls. Maybe even be the first story there ever was. She raised her brow. Picture that if you can. Molly knew what the woman was doing. She was creating a mood. It was something Molly did when she wanted people to really listen. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine what the world might be like before boats and roads and kings and wars. A world fresh and new. The woman cleared her throat, and when she spoke again her voice had a sort of music to it. "There once was a wise man who lived in a garden. The man had a magic touch about him, and his plot was filled with all manner of strange plants, the like of which hasn't been seen before or since. People called him the night gardener, and that was because the garden would only blossom under the light of a full moon." Molly looked at Kip, who was looking at her. Did this woman somehow know about the flowers in the woods? Was she teasing them? Did the flowers glow white? Kip asked. "I hadn't heard that," Hester said. "I suppose they might have." Glowing or not, the man loved his garden, and he cared for it year in and year out. He sang to his plants and trimmed their leaves and talked to them as though they were his own children, which they were in a manner of speaking. She leaned closer, and then one day there grew a new child, a tree. This tree was different from everything else in the garden. This tree was alive. Molly heard Kip gasp. "Did it have roots that moved?" he said. Hester puffed at her pipe. "Again, I can't say." The curious thing about the tree was its fruit. What was its fruit? Molly asked despite herself. Anything. The woman opened her eyes wide. The tree would give you whatever you wished for. She shook her head as if she too had trouble believing it. Can you imagine? Molly swallowed. She thought of the letters in her dress pocket. But the things it gave were real, right? Real as you or me. People came from all around to have their heart's desire granted to them. The poor found riches, the ugly found love, the sick found strength. Molly heard Kip shift in his seat, and all the tree asked in return was a single drop of your soul. Your soul? Kip said, clasping his fingers. Just a drop, mind you. There's folks who will pay much more than that for much less. She drew on her pipe. At the end of each day, after all the people had gotten their wishes and gone home, the night gardener would make his own wish. I've everything a man could want, he'd say. Stars overhead, soil below, and my children around me. All I ask is that you might never end. Just as a blossom turns to seed, I wish that I may never die. And every time he uttered these words, the tree would always answer the same way. Help me grow tall, and you shall receive all that you wish inside of me. Wait, Molly wrinkled her nose. The tree could talk? Hester gave her an irritated look. Legends are not helped by the literal mind. The tree spoke, that's all I know. She relit her pipe, which had gone out. So the night gardener spent his days caring for the tree, and the tree spent its days caring for people. And at the end of every day, when the sun fell from the sky, the night gardener would make his wish of the tree, and the tree would answer as it always had. Help me grow tall, and you shall receive all that you wish inside of me. Years passed, and the tree grew stronger and taller. The other plants in the garden withered and died, but the man did not care. He wanted only to tend his beloved tree. And then one day, when the man was very old, he came to the tree one last time. He fell before it, hobbled and weak. All I have is gone, he said. My garden is bare. My body is broken. I have given my life to help you grow. In all these years, never once have I tasted your fruit. And now I ask with my very last breath, will you grant my wish? The tree was now enormous. Its branches nearly scratched the sky, and this time it answered a little differently. Now I am tall, and so now you'll receive all that you wish inside of me. And with that, the tree spread its branches and leaned over with its great broad trunk. It opened its mouth wide and... She clapped her hands together. Swallowed the man whole. The old woman sat back in her chair looking spent. And that is the legend of the night gardener. Molly sat for a moment in confined silence. That cannot be, she said. What happened to him after that? He died, I suppose, or he didn't. The woman shrugged. The legend doesn't tell that part. Molly felt a flush of anger, the way she did when someone had tricked her. But it has to. It has to end proper. Stories don't have to do anything. They just have to be. She leaned forward. But imagine if it were true. She stared between them, her eyes shining. Imagine what a person could do with just a little clipping from a tree like that. She wet her lips. Why, she'd be queen of the world. Or she'd be swallowed whole, Kip said. Hester rapped her knuckles against the table. Sharp as ever, this one. She cackled and peered out across the room. Orange light was bleeding in through the shuttered cracks, and Molly realized that it must be nearly sundown. I love to stay here and chat, but then you two would be going home in the dark, and we can't have that. Kip volunteered to fetch the wagon and suggested that Molly stay behind to help Hester with her pack. Molly helped the old woman gather her things, and the two of them emerged from the tavern. She breathed deep, tasting the fresh air in the late afternoon. I'm sorry if my story wasn't to your liking. Hester adjusted her pack, teetering slightly. Perhaps you can make up an ending that suits your fancy. Seems like cheatin', Molly said. She was staring at the button hanging from the woman's neck. Hester touched the button. Funny things, wishes. You can't hold 'em in your hand, and yet just one could unmake the world. She looked up at Molly. I can imagine that a person who knew where to get wishes might think it was smart to keep it a secret. The woman had the same hungry look in her eyes as before. Molly took a step back, wishing that Kip would be faster with the cart. There's no use talking about it, she said. It's all just make-up lies anyway. Hester gave a little chuckle. You asked me for a story, now you call it a lie. She folded her arms. So tell me then, what marks the difference between the two? Agitated as she was, Molly couldn't help but consider the question. It was something she had asked herself in one form or another many times in her life. Still, Molly could tell the difference between the two as easily as she could tell hot from cold. A lie put a sting in her throat that made the words catch. It had been some time, however, since she had felt that sting. A lie hurts people, she finally answered. A story helps them. True enough. But helps them do what? She wagged a finger. That's the real question. The old woman swung her hurdy-gurdy off her shoulder. I'll leave you with that. She gave a curtsy and started down the road, playing as she walked. Molly thought the song sounded familiar, but she couldn't tell where she'd heard it before. She shivered, putting her hands into her pockets. Her fingers touched the letters from Ma and Dad. From Ma and Dad, she thought to herself, or from the tree. Chapter 32 is called Fruit. I'm going to stop right there, and I will be back tomorrow.